So, Bob, I've been running around all morning and haven't had time to pre-read these emails. So this will be an adventure for both of us.
Yeah.
This first email is from middle tier anonymous patron. She writes, do you fight with your friends over interpersonal issues? Like one of you perceives that the other one is ignoring their needs or not treating them fairly. I see. So do you fight with your friends over your relationship, essentially, right?
Yeah.
I've recently been struggling with resentment towards a friend I am close to, and I feel like whenever I bring it up with them, it's either at the wrong time or I sound way harsher than I should. I'm hoping for examples of a good model. The reason I'm focusing on friendship conflicts is because I have a fear that the friend can just exercise the option of cutting me off if they feel like I'm too much, or at the very least just choose to reduce the amount of time they spend with me. It bothers me a lot, even though I know that these options are available to me too. I also don't hear much about how much interpersonal conflict in a close relationship is when it is too much, as opposed to it being very normalized in romantic relationships. I see. So she's like,
Yeah.
It's normal. People say marriages are work, but when it comes to friendships, people don't tend to talk about it that way.
Right.
If you are comfortable, would you be able to share your perspective and examples from your life and practice on how you have navigated issues like this in friendships before? Love your work. Bob, what do you think?
Yeah, good question. I like this question. So in terms of me personally, yeah, a couple times I've gotten into conflict with friends. In general, I don't, because it's just most of the time it doesn't come up, but I'm thinking about two friendships where that's come up, and I'd say that we made attempts to deal with it that were, in good faith. And one was successful and one was less so, though not terrible. So yes, sometimes, but not often. Now, I'm kind of avoidant of conflict, and so I'm sort of a get along kind of person. So when this happened years ago, I remember feeling completely stunned by something that my friend said to me and filled with shame. I remember exactly. I was sitting in a pub and I was eating a turkey and Swiss sandwich with a little bacon on it.
Toasted?
Yeah. And my friend said this thing that just stunned me, just stunned. And I remember looking down at the sandwich and not knowing why I felt that way. And then, soon after that, we said goodnight for the evening. And it took me a few days, I think, actually, for it to sort of gel in my head that was actually kind of dick, what they said to me. Then years later, because, we sort of patched it up, but not really, but a little bit, but, whatever. Another friend that we had in common remarked on it, that the friend I had the conflict with, that person had said something to this other friend about taking a cheap shot at me. And I was surprised that they actually recognized that was the case. I thought it was kind of shitty, but it took me a few days to understand that it was. I don't think we really did a stellar job of repairing it, but I think I don't have the will to do that. Like, I don't want to, or I suppose I would if I wanted to, but we're still friends.
What's the barrier?
I don't want to.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, I sort of feel like that friendship is more, it's unbalanced, and I don't see it becoming balanced where there's like a give and take. So since that's the case, in some ways the conflict sort of woke me up to that. And since it's not as much give and take as I would like, and I just, I've withdrawn from it to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, I'm infusing what I know about this conflict.
I never told you about it. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. I'm infusing what I know behind the scenes and what you're saying. And
yeah.
I think maybe what you're saying, and correct me if I'm wrong, please, that you don't want to because you don't trust that it would work out exactly.
I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, no matter how much reasonable effort you put into reconciling completely, because there's been some reconciliation.
Yeah,
but,
there has. Yeah.
But to get back to the original closeness,
Yeah.
you just don't either think that that's possible given the dynamic or the way that each of you processes things, or even if you did completely reconcile, you don't trust that something like this wouldn't happen again.
Yeah,
right?
or some version of it. Some version. Yeah. I don't think that they would. They're not malicious. No, but in some ways unskilled. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Whereas with your other friend that you had a significant conflict with, and we're
years.
talking about like years and years ago, you do have that trust, or you were never as close with that person.
Oh, well, no, I'm not sure I know which one we're talking about now. I think I do. That one thing from a long time ago, right? That long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had a different...
We almost had a fight about it, kind of.
We did.
Yeah.
In the parking lot at the Northgate Mall.
Yeah. Well, it was a strip mall off of the Northgate Mall, I think.
Was it?
Like the mattress. For some reason were you looking for a mattress at the time or something?
God, was it the mattress place?
I don't know. But it could have been the North. It was in that area.
Yeah,
anyway,
right. Yeah. We got into a...
I was defending the other friend.
Rightfully so.
Kind of. Not like you're wrong, Bob, but
No.
I was just like, hey, take it easy a little bit.
Yeah.
And I got
Yeah.
your upsetness. You didn't yell at me or anything,
No.
but I was like, oh, mainly I just thought
Yeah.
I was being stupid for.
No, you weren't.
Well, I was being a little stupid for not reading the room. You know, it wasn't what you wanted or needed at the time.
Well, yeah, but it might have been useful. I mean, I think about that moment, and I just like, Jesus Christ, dude, why'd you even start the conflict in the first place? I didn't mean to start a conflict, but I did.
Yeah.
And I should have just fucking kept my mouth shut because none of my business and not that big a deal, right? So like whatever. Like
Well, it kind of on the surface was a big deal without getting into the details. It did matter. You did have a right, so to speak, to say something, but it was fueled also just by a number of crescendoing stresses in your life, right?
God, I can't remember that. I mean, what else was going on in my world? Do you remember?
Well, just in terms of attachment stuff and grief and loss and other, and just general attachment chaos of the time. I mean, we're literally talking like 25 years ago.
We are.
You've grown a lot since then.
Oh, I hope so.
And I also wonder if there was some righteousness to you as well.
You think?
Well, not in the bad way, but righteous, right? Yeah, like right. We often use the word righteous as a bad word, but it technically is a good word. Righteous is to be right, to be elevated and intelligent and wise and right, and not righter than, but just right. And I think that there was some level of knowledge that you brought to the situation that made it maybe even harder for you to let go of it because you're just like, but I think I'm right about this.
Yeah,
is that
that was my thinking at the time.
Yeah, which I don't think is wrong, but the latching on and the
completely ham-handed in the way I handled
right.
it. Just totally biffed it.
Which you don't do. So the only way that can be is if there were other factors that were fueling it, i.e. the attachment, stress, and grief and stuff.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Not to bring all that back up, but
no, it's fine.
But the larger question, well, getting back to that idiom of marriage is work.
Yeah.
Why don't we say friendships are work?
I don't know.
It's weird.
I don't find them particularly worky.
Well, the closer they get,
sure,
the more worky they are.
Yeah.
But, even in marriage, I think, this is an interesting thing. So I'll just speak from a parallel thing because I think it's just a larger, and I guess I think about this all in the same category, whether it's my friends or my wife, that there are times when some people will annoy me or hurt my feelings, and it'll get under my skin. And there's different markers for the severity. Like if I'm mildly annoyed to the point where God, there's so many things to say. I'll just finish this thought. So I have a gauge of how bad it was for me because I'm also generally conflict avoidant and will default to like, let's not make things weird, you know? Yeah. But I wonder if everyone's this way because I think when I say I'm conflict avoidant, I wouldn't say that I'm above average in conflict avoidance. I feel like everyone is basically conflict avoidant. And I think some people are even more so, you know?
Yeah.
But anyway, because I'm certainly not shy. I won't shy away from saying things. So, God, there's so many things to say. So let me finish this out. So if I'm upset a week later, then that says something, right? If I'm upset the next day, that's one thing. But if 2 days go by and I'm not upset, and 3 days go by and I'm literally like, well, that was all my fault, because sometimes that'll happen.
Yeah.
Or likely it was all my fault.
Yeah.
Then that's one thing.
Yeah.
But if a week later I'm still like, that, and then this analysis kind of kicks in of just like, is it worth it? What do I say? Do I wait another week for it to? Because sometimes I'll do that. Sometimes I'll wait like a month, and by that point, the energy, because that's always the risk, is that if I bring it up with a friend or with Stacy, that I'll have too much energy and it will ruin the opportunity.
Right. Me too.
And so the longer time goes by, and and long-term marriages and friendships, what's a month really,
Yeah, right.
But I would say most of the time by day 3, I will have forgotten it and I'm cool with it. And, I don't know if that's the best way to do things. I think it's one way to do things. I think another aspect of this is that middle tier anonymous patron is that sometimes bringing it up later on makes it weird. Not necessarily, but like when I think about my relationship with you or with Stacy or with Umberto and others, a lot of I would say 95% of the things that bug me, I'll just say in the moment. And then there's no energy around it.
Yeah.
Like, don't do that. That's weird.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? Or I don't know if it's just me, but I don't like it when you do that.
Yeah.
So don't do it.
Yeah.
And it can come, the way I'm framing it comes across as a demand, but if it's playful enough and light enough,
Yeah.
then I think it comes across as the way I'm hoping, which is like, it's not really a demand. It's just like, please stop, or, and I think, I hope anyway, and maybe you can tell me, that it can build trust in that, well, I know him to be someone that will say something, and he's not, he doesn't build up energy around it. He might even forget like a week later that he said, don't do that. And if I do it again, he's not going to like hammer me. I don't know. What do you think? Because I do that with you sometimes. I'll be like, don't do that. That annoys me.
Yeah. Well, good. I can't think of a single time you've done it. I know that it's true.
Yeah.
But obviously I'm not like holding on to anything.
Yeah.
Hope I'm not then therefore repeating.
What do you mean?
Like, don't do that. I can't remember what you told me not to do, and then I do it. Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
I try to, a long time ago, I tried to be more radically honest in this way, while trying to be less busted up about it as I do it.
Good for you.
It's sort of like you have a booger on your face.
Yeah.
Your fly is down.
Right.
Or your shirt is or you have toilet paper coming out of your belt or whatever, or just that you just say it, right? Instead of like worrying, and then by the time you say it, it comes out so weird, and then you as the one that's being told, you're like, wait, so you've been sitting here for the past 3 hours like staring at that booger on my face, like worrying about saying something to me. What else are you sort of busted up? What else are you editing yourself?
Right.
Like it's a weird thing to not trust someone for being too careful with your feelings. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I don't know. I'm certainly not. I don't have a good answer to this, I guess. I think the best answer is to say that Bob and I aren't perfect in this way, and I think that when I'm doing things well, I'm doing two things. I'm approaching people with warmth and kindness and appreciation and authenticity, while also occasionally saying, hey, I want to talk with you about something. Is it okay?
Yeah.
And taking responsibility. But both things kind of have to happen.
Yeah, agree.
Like when I think about but it takes effort.
Yeah.
And it's vulnerable. And you don't know what the other person's going to do. But I think about this the same way I think about skiing. I hate skiing until I get off the chairlift at the top of the mountain.
Really?
Then I love it.
No shit.
I hate waking up at the butt fuck of dawn. I hate getting all the gear together. I hate getting out of the car in the cold. I hate that first kind of like breeze of snowy, just horrible. There's no amount of bundling up that you can do that make your toes not numb.
Yeah.
And I hate all that, but and whenever anyone invites me to go skiing, because I'm never the one that initiates, I'm always like, oh god damn. But when I get off the ski lift, I always say, oh, I should do this every day. I love this feeling. And it's the same when it comes to conflict resolution with friends and in marriage. It's like I always resist it, and then once even just as I imagine the feeling now as I'm talking, it's like that feeling of cresting that hill. It's like, and it just feels more authentic, more real, happier, stabilizing, grounded, all the things, Do you know what I mean?
I do. Yeah, sure. Feels good once you get going.
Yeah.
And so this has that potential. I used to teach this shit when I was teaching DBT, and that's been running through my head as I'm sort of thinking about the question that we're asked here. And so anonymous patron, DBT land, here's what they would say. They'd say, when you're in a conflict situation, there's three things to think about. There's first off is, what do you want? In other words, what do you want the other person to do or not do or change or just know or, listen to or whatever? Second thing is, how do you want them to feel as a result of bringing it up? Like, if you bring it up, how do you want them to feel? Do you want them to feel good about you? Do you want them to feel, most of the time, if it's a friend, you want your friend to feel good, right? And then the third thing is, how do you want to feel about yourself when it's all said and done? Even if you don't get what you want, and even if they're alienated, right? And then you rank them. Like, if I could only have one of these, which one is the most important? And then you use that as a way to decide what to do. So if getting what I need is really important, then there's a formula that she's got for how to be assertive. And you can find that online. It's not too hard to find. And there's YouTube videos about it. Though you don't have to throw away relationship effectiveness skills, which is what they call it when you want the other person to feel good about you. And in fact, those generally with a friendship will enhance the likelihood that you get what you want, right? So sometimes it's as simple as saying, our friendship's really important to me. And so that's why I'm bringing this up, right? Because you matter so much to me, I wanted to talk about this with you, cuz, whatever. As opposed to, hey man, you were late for the 5th time, right? Right. It hurts when you're late, and you're so important to me that I wanted to bring it up because I it could get in the way for me, and I'm not trying to judge or anything, but this is a thing for me, whatever. Right. And then, so anyways, I don't generally like formulaic things, but I found that I've coached hundreds of people to do that, even in the most heinous, hairy situations. Oftentimes, very quickly, they become clear about what it is that they want to do. Sometimes they end up doing something they didn't expect that they would do. They thought, the most important thing is that I get the person to change, and it turns out it's actually not. And the most important thing is the friendship. Okay, so that's really going to change the tone. If I do anything, it's going to change the tone that I take. It'll be softer. It'll be, gentler. It'll be maybe less direct. Who knows, right? Anyways, look it up if you want. It might help you with the thing that you wrote in about, with the conflict with the friend. And, help prevent too much energy. I like the way you put that, too much energy. Too much energy from coming in, because sometimes all you need is a thumb for a thumbtack, not a sledgehammer.
Yeah.
Right. And my first thing is to grab a sledgehammer. It's almost never useful.
Because the thumbtacks build up and coalesce into a sledgehammer?
Yeah, and also because I think I have a vulnerability to perceiving something I have a vulnerability to perceiving an affront as bigger than it is, and I also have a vulnerability to trusting what I think, which is sometimes distorted, a fair amount of the time distorted, and so therefore the energy that I bring is distorted, is disproportionate.
Yeah, so. I mean, I don't know if this is what you're referring to exactly, but I think we can all do this, that we will shadow box prior to bring it up.
Yeah.
And we'll come in hot.
Yep.
As if the shadow boxing opponent actually was the other person.
Right.
Like you come in halfway through an argument in your head trying to like really hammer the other person. You really got to listen to me. And in reality, you've just been fighting with yourself.
Right.
And the other person's like, why am I getting all this energy?
Right.
So there's a number of hints, middle tier anonymous patron, though, that I want to point to that I think we can all relate to. But you say, do you ever talk about friends with interpersonal issues, like one of you perceives that the other one is ignoring their needs and not treating them fairly? So right there, it's a pretty severe statement. And maybe it's true that, you're not saying you have a particular friend that you're thinking of, but I'm guessing you are. And even just that framing in your mind, ignoring your needs, that it's possible that you're spinning it, or at the very least, there's a choice there. Because if you have a friend that is literally ignoring your needs, and that's a rational way of putting it, depending on what you're referring to, then by definition, you really should blast them in a way, whereas the vast majority of instances in which, I'll just speak personally, in which I believe that my friends or my wife is ignoring my needs, they are not ignoring my needs, or at least that's not what a jury of my peers would say. They would say that a misunderstanding happened, or I'm sensitive, or the person was a little insensitive, or was distracted, or not attuned, or not putting me as a priority as much as I would wish, or something. There's just a lot of different ways to put it. So there's that. The other thing that I'm detecting, you say, I recently been struggling with resentment towards a friend. So that resentment is perhaps justifiable, but as we talk about with Gottman, once you enter into that pattern of resentment, then that portends the end of a relationship, whether it's a marriage or a friendship. And so figuring out a way forward for that, figuring out a way to dissipate that resentment, either alone by yourself or with your friend, is paramount, even to just the micro interaction of being assertive about your issues. Because if you come into it with resentment, it's going to be hard to manage your intensity around it. And then you say, I feel like whenever I bring it up with them, it's either at the wrong time or I sound way harsher than I should. So I think you're admitting to that. I mean, wrong time, that I'm guessing if I knew the details of that, I would say, well, when is the right time? But sounding way harsher, yeah. So you want Bob modeled a little bit. I'll additionally model. This is almost always what I do. I have a preamble, and I'll kind of rehearse it ish beforehand. Not like I'm sitting there in front of the mirror, but as you do, it's just like, okay, I probably should bring this up. And when I'm at my best, I think anyway, I will have some version of the following, which I'll say, hey, that thing that happened, it hurt my feelings, and it's hard for me to see at this point, but I'm quite positive that 90% of this is just my own sensitivity and not anything to do with your lack of care or something. So I just want you to know that I'm asking for a favor. I'm not telling you to do something that you did wrong. 2, the severity of this issue isn't very high, so don't think like I'm on the verge of breaking up with you or something. It's just one of those things that sort of has been sticking in my craw, and I just want you to know how I feel because I care about our relationship. And then I launch into whatever. And then what I do from that point is, as briefly as possible, I try to walk the person through my experience. So we were sitting there and this happened and I thought this was happening and then you said this, and at the time I didn't really notice it, but I think I was hurt. And then that's when I did this thing and then you did that, and then I interpreted it this way, whether that's true or not, and then that's why I was in a bad mood for the rest of the night or something like that. And so all the components there are, even if I can't identify it in the moment, I assume that I'm 90% to blame, so to speak. To me, there's nothing wrong with taking that position, even if I'm wrong about that, because it still has 10% to blame on the other person. So I'm not taking 100% of the blame. And there's no harm in that. If both people do that, then, it goes over much better. Plus, often it's the case. Like, give me 3 months and I'll be like, yeah, that was 90% me, But, it's hard to see that within the first number of weeks, honestly. Yeah. It's so hard to accurately assess that kind of thing. So I'm just going off of wisdom developed from trial and error over time, that it's like, okay, I'm in that spot. What's the chance that this is that one time where I'm like 100%, right, blah, blah, blah. And so I just assume, and then, lets the other person off the hook. And in all likelihood, the other person is thinking that, it's just like, yeah, well, you are sensitive, and it gets out ahead of it, because they don't have to point it out. They don't have to defend. Well, you were being sensitive. They don't have to say that because you already fucking said it. And if they said it, you could be like, yeah, I just said that. I agree with you. Let's move to the next step, which is your 10%, And also, it doesn't put the fear of God into them, because I'm saying on the scale of things, this is a 2 out of 10, if we don't resolve this. The other thing I'll say that I do is that as a professional communicator, I have to drill it into my fucking thick skull that almost no one can even comes close to my communication skill, because I'm a fucking professional. There's this one podcast I listen to, TBTL, and they have this drop that they play from Larry King where he's like, I'm a professional. Anyway, that just came up in my head. I'm a professional communicator, and I coach people on how to communicate. I study it. I have written about it. I have read about it. I have repeated it over and over and over again. I know how to evaluate my countertransference, how to precisely identify my emotional reactivity in the moment. No one, aside from people like us, Bob, have that skill even close to the ability that we have. So to expect them to respond well under the stress of even the nice way in which I laid it out is too much. They can't. So I lower my expectations to the almost absolute minimum when it comes to how other people will respond. And I just say, unless it's you, honestly, I just say, one, best, reasonable best case scenario, they don't slap me in the face and walk out of the room. And if we're short of that, then anything that happens in all likelihood will work out because the person cares. And even if they respond shittily, which almost always happens, they're almost always defensive. They almost always nitpick some weird thing that I said, like, oh, it wasn't at 9:00, it was at 8:30. And you're like, well, did you listen to all the other fucking shit I said? But it doesn't matter because they care and they love me and they will think about it. And they will never tell me that they thought about it. Or it will be minimal, it will, because if someone, when people come to me with things, I'm like, okay, let me get a cup of coffee. Let me get my Afghan. Let's sit down. Let's talk. I'm comfy. I'm in my element. Let's go. Like, thank you. I'm like, can I make it more comfortable for you? Because I'm comfortable. It's my bread and butter. It's my comfy Afghan. Having conflict with someone that I love, where they're bringing something up, like, thank you for the gift of telling me. No one else is like that. Very few people are like that. So I just, it's like I'm a plumber walking someone through how to plumb something. I'm a race car driver trying to instruct a 16-year-old how to park a car. I'm not going to expect them to be as good as I am. And because I've learned through experience that I tend to expect people to be as good as me. And it always results in being upset at the end because I'm just like pulling teeth, trying to lead them to the water to drink. And I'm just like, don't you see the way? You just have to release yourself of the hang-ups of always being right. And there's such a glorious feeling of trust and togetherness when you can just assume that you're wrong. We'll both assume that each of us are wrong. I was wrong. You were wrong. Now, I'm selling people short. My wife is capable of this and has done stuff like this, but not all the time. Let's just put it that way. You know what I mean? And not immediately, right? So, those are all the things that I do when it comes to conflict. I think I modeled that sufficiently in this context. The other thing, middle tier anonymous patron, that you say is, the reason why I'm focusing on this is because I have the fear that my friend can just exercise the option of cutting me off if they feel like I'm too much. Okay, so I get that. And yeah, and it sounds like there's some history there, right? And that assumes that they don't need you just as much as you need them. That's very important, and that shadow boxing also involves this assumption that they don't, they could take you or leave you. But in all likelihood, they need you just as much as you need them. And if you're the sort of person that tends to think about closeness and these kinds of issues, like you put mental energy into it, you might actually be better at friendship and at vulnerability and at your own emotions and noticing your needs than other people are. And people that are more in denial of those things have a harder time meeting their needs with friendships and relationships. So they might need you way more than you could ever imagine. So heading into the relationship, as long as it's rational to conclude that the friendship is close and the other person does appreciate you, to head into that with this attitude that, well, if things start to go badly, they're just going to drop me like a box of rocks, is shadow boxing in a way that will make you pre-hurt and pre-angry at them. And I can relate, it's one of those things. And this is just general advice for everyone, that through these conflict moments or these relationship reorienting or defining or clearing the air moments, on the other side is even greater closeness and greater trust and less shadowboxing and more assuming that the other person won't just cut you off and assuming that the other person does care. Like my general trust of other people isn't because other people are good communicators, but because generally speaking, after these moments, I see evidence, because I actually look for it is another thing, that supports the conclusion that other people care deeply about me. Not because I'm a special, unique flower, but because people need people. And I need them and they need me. And heading into a conflict with that assumption for me makes it so much better, so much lighter, so much less energy around it. And can sometimes even result in me just saying something off the cuff because I'm not terrified of saying things, So it's a lot of things. And what you'll see online is these tips on how to be assertive, like just be firm and believe in yourself and say and state it. And it's like, yeah, okay. But it ignores all that other shit that I just said. Being assertive, what I'm laying out is assertiveness. On TikTok, it won't sound assertive to say I'm 90% to blame. Now, it's complicated because if you have extremely low self-esteem, then those kind of statements can actually be self-destructive, depending. But if that's not where it's coming from, like you're not beating yourself up, it's actually probably helpful to say it, and might even be helpful to see it that way for yourself, just assuming. Anyway, so assertiveness is... especially in very close, if you're just being assertive with the cashier, that's one thing. But if you're assertive in a long-term relationship, these sorts of things are cultivated, and it has to do with trust and trauma and abandonment and love and patterns. Like the way that I communicate, I would evaluate from the outside as saying that guy communicates well. But if I were from the outside evaluating the way other people in my life communicate, I would say they communicate poorly. But when I really zoom out, I would say that each is communicating well, and that you just have to know what to listen for and what to look for. Not that it's hidden or that it's subtle or that it's roundabout. It's just proofs in the pudding, You said something. Does the person show evidence that they're actually adjusting, Because that's all that I'm looking for. Is I don't need people to change. I just want them to know and care that I want them to change. Because that likely will lead to them trying to change. But I don't know how hard it is for them to change that thing, Maybe it's... some of the things I ask for are impossible to change on some level, But I want people to show that they're incorporating my preference, It's like, this is my preference, and their decision tree involves me in it. I don't need to be the priority. I don't need it to always go my way, but it's like, So that communication can happen verbally, which is nice. Like, I'm making you a priority, or I'm thinking I'll incorporate that into my decision tree. But honestly, that's a distant second to actually doing it, So if I look for it and I see, and I almost always see that people do it, the people who don't verbally, navigate through that in this overt way, at least the people in my life that I'm close to, they all show extreme evidence that they actually are deeply thinking about these things, So that's me rambling about that. Let's take a break.
Right on.
All right, back for the break. Do you have any thoughts about all that?
No, I think we did a good job.
Patron Sid from Seattle, she says, "Hi, Dr. Kirk and PISS team. I'm a CFT and art therapy student at Antioch University, Seattle, and I recently wrote a newsletter for the wider Antioch community that featured an episode of Psychology in Seattle. Listening to Dr. Kirk about his own experiences with dyslexia and really breaking down each criteria was eye-opening for me. I resonated so much with what you described in the episode, and it pushed me to research dyslexia more. And now I'm 99% certain that I also have dyslexia. I'm now learning more about how my brain works. I'm getting more support, and most importantly, I'm being a lot more kind with myself when it comes to school and work." So just chiming in here. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I've been hearing from people along these lines, and because dyslexia was one of the first neuro differences or learning disabilities that I probably heard about. It's probably like the first one that I heard about. I remember hearing about it in the 70s, and yet I didn't self-identify until just like a year or two ago. So what is that, right? And I think it's because of the massive just misunderstanding, the simplistic way in which dyslexia is talked about, which is fine, but and obviously lack of screening, and because it wouldn't have taken long for a teacher or some specialist to identify me in the third grade. It was, especially back then, it was pretty obvious given how different I was when it came to reading out loud or reading. And they would test us for reading comprehension and stuff, but they never tested us for the kinds of things that would catch dyslexia. You know what I mean? Anyway, but I think another element to this is that if you do well in school, then, Sid is a master's level student, so she's probably pretty good in school. I think there's this lack of a flag of, hey, I wonder if there's a difference. Now, would it have mattered if the answer is yes, it probably would have helped me. But I don't know. On one level, it might not have helped me as much as one might think, because it was always assumed by me and my teachers that I would be good at reading and writing because I was smart in other subjects. And I was a straight A student, so I must be good at all the things, right? And so maybe that assumption just pushed me to, maybe if I knew I had dyslexia, I don't know. I wonder if I would have avoided advanced placement English classes and that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I don't know. But it is kind of interesting that another student, another professional in psychology is like, wait, do I have dyslexia? Anyway, going on. Here is the newsletter I published in February of 2025. Wait, am I dyslexic? Since childhood, reading has activated my inner critic. Why does it take me so long? Why can't I just focus? How many times do I have to reread this before it makes sense? But after listening to a podcast episode on dyslexia from Psychology in Seattle, everything clicked. I think I'm actually dyslexic. Suspecting friends had asked me in the past, but I always denied the possibility out of my own misconceptions. Just chiming in here. No one ever asked me in the past. And I would frequently tell people that I could read faster out loud than in my head.
I heard you say that once.
Right. And no one ever said, have you thought, or at least to my memory, or maybe I shouldn't say that. There's a possibility that someone did say, have you thought you might have dyslexia? I probably, I'm guessing, would have instantly dismissed that. No, I don't have dyslexia. I just have this weird thing, I guess. And yeah, just looking back, it's so funny that I never thought, especially in my adult life, what's up with that? Because I would see other people read and how fast they could read. They would read a book, like my mom, for example. They would sit down an afternoon and finish half a book. And I just thought, like, how do you do that, Like, do you remember the speed reading commercials in the 90s?
Oh, yeah. Evelyn Wood, speed reading.
Tell me about that.
Oh, well, I never took it, but they'd show these videos of people and their hand would just drag down a page. So they'd read the whole page in like a half a second and then on to the next ones. And then there's sort of like a blur of flipping pages, blip, 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 and work your way through an entire book in 12 minutes.
Yeah.
I never understood it. Though I did have a supervisor years ago, David Taylor. He used to do that, and the guy read everything. So I mean, that's probably how he did it, is speed reading. But I don't actually know what it is. I think though, you just somehow teach your brain to search for keywords, and I don't really get it, because you're just scanning. Actually, really just skimming, not scanning. Scanning's detailed. Skimming is cursory. I don't even know how it works.
Yeah.
I haven't heard about it in years.
Yeah, it was a really big thing in the 90s.
Yeah.
And I remember that's how it feels. That's how you've seemed to me. The fact that you can read at the normal pace is akin to the way you feel when you would see. It just seems like a magic.
Right.
It almost seems unbelievable.
Yeah.
Like in the way that you assume that they're skimming and they're not actually retaining all the details.
Right.
I wondered sometimes if other people were doing that because of how fast they could read something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just funny, in school, when you'd be tasked with silently reading something, I would always be the last one to turn the page.
Yeah.
And I would get nervous, which probably didn't help, but I'd be like, oh, shit, I'm going to be the last person. So I gotta go fast, read faster. It's really just quite comical just how, I don't know what you say, just how out of touch or ignorance or just lack of anyone seriously asking the question. Or I suspect that if I were 10 years younger, it would have probably been identified maybe a little bit more, because, the 70s, I feel like kids were kind of an afterthought, Anyway, listener Olivia from Michigan, she says, thank you for your teaching. Oh, by the way, Sid, thanks for talking about us in the Antioch newsletter. That's quite an honor, and it's nice to know that I'm still kind of a part of the system. People will sometimes say, oh, well, you're retired. And I never planned on fully retiring from teaching. And I still haven't officially retired. I do want, and I do have plans to teach. It just hasn't worked out schedule-wise. So I feel like I'm still a part of the Antioch system in a way. I don't know if they would ever let me back if I wanted to teach as an adjunct or something. But anyway, listener from Michigan, she says, thank you for your teachings. As a nurse, this podcast is very helpful for my job, and the information feeds my curious mind. I'm writing with a question about therapist vulnerability. Are therapists trained to ever step out of a session for a small period of time? Just chiming in, Bob, what do you think?
It was never explicitly part of my training. I know good therapists who do it from time to time, and my current professional crush, Stan Tatkin, recommends people do that to help regulate if they need to. If the couples, he does couple therapy. If the couple's going to just take a pee break, just leave and help yourself get settled. So, but it was never part of my training, and I never had it modeled.
Yeah, same. I never heard a professor say that you can't, or at least that's my memory. But it's just kind of baked into the culture overall that to do such a thing would be weird, maybe seen as disrespectful or weak or something, or bad therapy or floppy therapy or unprofessional or something. But yeah, I recommend people do this. Have you ever done it before yourself?
I can think of one time I did it. Oh man, 20 years ago. 20?
Do you think you should do it more often than that?
Oh, and about a month ago, I was doing a 2-hour session with a couple, and at 1:45, I just had to pee. So I'm
Well,
like,
that's actual pee.
Yeah.
But like, have you had to?
to regulate.
Yeah. Like, I'll just answer the question myself. Is
Sure.
that I refrain from doing this when I probably should, even though I recommend that people do it, and intellectually I know that it's okay to do.
Yeah.
I still don't do it as nearly as much as I probably
No.
should. And I don't think if I did it as much as I should, it would probably happen like once every couple months, even when I was full time. So I'm not saying it would be a frequent necessity, but I would say that I almost never did this when I probably should have.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Last week I saw a couple, and they were just going at it, and nothing I did would slow them down. So it was all Zoom. I literally just pushed my chair away from my table and sat back about 4 feet and folded my arms and waited. And just waited till they were done. And again, my teacher, that's the advice that he gives. It's like these high arousal couples, this is just what happens, and good luck interrupting it. So just wait. Sometimes he'll lay down on the floor, and then when he gets their attention, he'll say, "Is this what your kids have to put up with?" Right? Stuff like that. But what are you going to do? There's people in the universe that have these nervous systems that go into high arousal. Sometimes they're a couple. Sometimes they ping off one another, and that's what comes. It's not dangerous. It's not ideal. And it isn't necessarily harmful to their relationship. They just are high E couples. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's often harmful to the relationship.
Yeah, he says it isn't. He says, let me restate. He says you're probably not going to make too much of a dent in it, but maybe you can get them to lower it some.
Right.
And it isn't harmful yet. Of course it's harmful. It isn't necessarily fatal.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not an emergency.
Right. It's not an emergency.
And even if it was, it's not your responsibility if they're
Right.
not going to, because, it often as it's escalating, we will try to help in some way.
Yeah.
Not by distracting them necessarily. I mean, maybe, but we're not there to save them from themselves, but we will try to, like I'm thinking of a couple where this would happen, and I might say something like, "Oh, okay, so, I might focus on one person and say, okay, so how are you feeling right now?"
Right.
And I'm attempting to get them to at least divert their attention more inward and away from the locked in back and forth that they get into. And the partner will just ignore me. Well, I kind of feel like he's being an asshole, and so we'll try, but if they don't take the bait and they're determined, then, I don't beat myself up and get frantic about it, All right, let's take a break. Get back, more emails.
Yep.
All right, next email, long-term patron Ivy. She says, "Hi, I'm an undergrad psychology student who is very interested in specializing in relational trauma and personality disorders. I bought some of your book recommendations, and I am currently reading Schema Therapy, A Practitioner's Guide. I'm loving learning about it, and I think the model is really interesting. I was listening to your schema episode with Bob, and you said you made some alterations to the model. I was wondering what alterations you've made and how they changed the therapy. In the episode, you said you were wanting to assess schemas in more people on the podcast. If you're still doing that, I would be interested. End of email. Yeah. So as I was going through the schema therapy model, I found that I wasn't personally a fan of the way it was worded, the different schemas and the questions involved, the items that you ask people were harder for me to sift through. And so as I was going through it in a more systematic way as a therapist, not as a podcaster or a professor, I was just developing my own usage of it, as I imagine a lot of clinicians do. I started to change the wording of it so it'd be easier to understand for just to me. I didn't think it would necessarily be more understandable to other people. And I changed the names of the, because I tend to prefer terminology that is immediately understandable. Like some of the schemas identified, they would have these really short titles, which, I think is the convention in things like this, like a one-word, abandonment schema or devaluation schema or something. But some of them didn't really lend themselves to that one-word terminology, and so for my own sake, in my notes, I just changed it to a phrase, a self-statement like, I have no value, and then it would be instantly understandable to me. And then as I was going through the items that Young and others developed, Jeffrey Young, the developer of schema therapy, and his colleagues, I started to look at like the 15 items that you would ask someone to test whether or not they have the schema. And I found that some of them didn't really seem to get at the core as well as some of the other ones. And so I would sort of pare them down, or I'd word them a little differently. It seemed like some of the items were a little redundant as well. I mean, part of it was, as I was going through it, I wanted a very quick reference that I could look to clinically and not have to, and maybe this has to do with dyslexia. I didn't want to have to sift through a lot of words. I wanted to very quickly just look at it and identify. And so I started to do that. And then I started to incorporate that into the episodes that we did. Like this was, I don't know, like 5 years ago or something, a long time ago. And yeah, I did put out a call of other people, but and we did have a number of people reach out, and I did have a number of people on the podcast to talk about their schemas, which I appreciate. But that project is no longer. The other thing is that I might have said I was going to share, or I'll just say that I'm not going to share my personal usage of schema therapy other than what I've already talked about on the podcast, because those kinds of publications need to be vetted and responsible and professional. And I don't have the energy or the interest in sifting through all the academic implications of that publication. Plus, it could be argued that I'm just repurposing someone else's theory. I mean, I would definitely be referencing Young and schema therapy and the others, but so what I'll say is that my adaptation in a lot of ways is exactly the same as the original model. So that's what I'll say about that. All right. Sui from Virginia. She says, I've been seeing a therapist for a couple months. We have about 9 sessions so far. My therapist specializes in CPT and prolonged exposure therapy. So cognitive processing therapy and prolonged exposure. These are kind of the gold standards for PTSD. So far, we haven't started the actual therapy yet. A couple of sessions we had were dedicated to her talking about how she plans her therapy for me and what will happen. And it still hasn't happened yet. Since these sessions are quite expensive, I don't feel great about wasting time and not actually starting the therapy. Is this normal? Is there a normal timeline when the therapy should start? Could she be stringing me along? Bob, what do you think? Is this a therapist red flag was the kind of main question she was asking.
It's possible, though, really, go find out. Just ask. What's going on here? When are we going to actually start the, exposure or CPT or whatever it is? Just find out. And if that fits for you, great. If it doesn't fit for you, either get her to change or maybe you find somebody else. I don't know.
Yeah. Would you say that 9 sessions is normal?
As I understand it, and I'm by no means an expert at this, that the research is for simple trauma, which means not like, an entire childhood of trauma, but like, say, one event. 9 to 12 sessions is generally what's enough to actually do the therapy.
Well, it's been 9 sessions of just planning, it sounds like.
No, I get it. I get it. That's different from, as I understand, FOA. That's Edna FOA. Edna FOA's research. It's 9 to 12 is they shoot for 9 and sometimes they'll go to 12, but then they consider it complete.
Yeah, and by simple trauma, we're talking about like a single car accident.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, like one medical procedure that went funny.
We're not talking about severity of trauma. One of those things could be really, really heinous for somebody, but it is a discrete event that has a beginning and an end.
Which is almost never the case.
Yeah.
When a client comes with trauma, it's almost never something like that.
Right. Yeah.
Although I encourage people to seek out therapy when they do have something like that. But it's hard. I don't really have much to add to what Bob said. Just say, why aren't we going faster?
Yeah.
Because if they specialize in CPT and prolonged exposure, in all likelihood, they actually enjoy doing the exposure part.
Right.
That's why they got into it, and they see the value in it.
Yeah.
You're Sui. You're not saying that the therapist is just a general therapist who dabbles in CPT, so they probably know all about this kind of thing. But so there's that. But if the person is a good therapist and knows what they're doing when it comes to this sort of thing, if I heard a colleague saying that they had performed 9 sessions of planning, I would assume that the therapist has determined, rightly or wrongly, that the client is not ready for exposure yet, because to head into exposure can be, prematurely can not only not be helpful, but it can actually be harmful, extremely harmful. So I wonder if the therapist is concluding that you are not at that point yet. Because I'm guessing that you're talking about something in those 9 sessions besides just planning. Because if it's just like, okay, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, I can't imagine that filling 9 sessions. So I'm guessing that in those 9 sessions, the therapist is doing the part of the therapy that I talk about a lot that's very important, that's often skipped, which is emotional distress awareness and regulation, which is hard to accomplish. For some people, it takes them literally years before I'm confident that we can head into exposure without harming them. So that's just a guess. But anyway. All right. Well, that does it for that episode of Psychology in Seattle. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because
you deserve it.